My girlfriend texted on my birthday. Surprise, it's not from me, it's from my ex. He still cares about you more than I do, lol. I responded, interesting. Then I opened the gift in front of her friends. It was lingerie, in her size with a note meant for her. When everyone realized what they were looking at, the text message arrived with a cheerful little ping, a sound I used to associate with good things. It was my 30th birthday party, and the house was full of noise and laughter, the kind of warm, chaotic symphony I'd always wanted. My wife, Clara, was across the room, holding court with a circle of her friends, her laughter the loudest instrument in the orchestra. She caught my eye and lifted her champagne flute, a perfect, polished smile on her face. It was the kind of smile she saved for photographs and public appearances, the one that never quite reached her eyes. I smiled back, a reflex honed over 5 years of marriage, and then looked down at my phone. The message was from her. It read, surprise, hope you like your big gift. It's not from me, by the way, it's from my ex. He still cares about you more than I do, lol. I read it once, then twice. The letters seemed to rearrange themselves, forming nonsensical patterns. The LOL at the end pulsed like a neon sign in a cheap motel. My ex, she meant her ex-husband, Richard. A man I'd met twice, a man whose existence was a carefully curated anecdote she used to illustrate her own resilience and my comparative good fortune. Why would Richard be sending me a birthday gift, and why would Clara be the one to orchestrate it, framing it with a joke so cruel it felt like swallowing glass? The air in the room suddenly felt thick and hot. The music, a breezy indie pop playlist I'd spent an hour putting together, now sounded like a screeching assault. I looked back at Clara. She was watching me, that same placid smile fixed in place, but there was a glint in her eye, a predatory stillness. It was the look of a scientist observing a reaction, waiting for the chemical change. My heart started a frantic, hammering rhythm against my ribs. My first instinct was to cause a scene, to walk over there, hold up the phone, and demand an explanation in front of everyone. I wanted to shatter her composure, to wipe that smug, knowing look off her face. But another, colder instinct took over. It was a survival mechanism I hadn't realized I'd developed over the years with her. A small, quiet voice that whispered, don't react, don't give her the satisfaction, observe. Her entire life was a performance, and my emotional outbursts were her favorite kind of applause. So I did something else. I typed back a single word, interesting. Then I put my phone back in my pocket, took a deep breath, and pasted a smile onto my own face. A few minutes later, one of her friends, a woman named Chloe, who always looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt, sashayed over with a large, beautifully wrapped box. It was heavy, adorned with a ridiculously ornate silver bow. Clara said, it's time for the grand finale, Chloe announced, her voice dripping with manufactured excitement. She placed the box on the coffee table in the center of the living room. The small crowd of our friends, my friends and her friends, a distinction that was becoming clearer by the second, gathered around. Open it, someone chanted, and the chorus was picked up by others. I looked at Clara, who gave me a little, who, me, shrug, the picture of innocent delight. She was enjoying this. This was the main event. My hands felt like they belonged to someone else as I fumbled with the ribbon. The paper was thick, expensive, and tore with a satisfying rip. Inside the box, nestled in layers of black tissue paper, was more black. It was silk, or something that looked like it. I lifted it out. A collective gasp went through the little crowd, followed by a few nervous titters. It was lingerie, a ridiculously intricate, barely there creation of lace and straps. But the truly jarring thing, the detail that made my stomach clench into a knot of ice, was the size. It was tiny. It would never in a million years fit me. It was, however, exactly Clara's size. Someone mumbled, is that a joke gift? I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on a small, cream-colored envelope tucked into the folds of the lace. My name was written on the front in a sharp, unfamiliar script. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling slightly. The card inside was simple. It read, can't wait to see you in this again. Thinking of you. All my love. R. My blood went cold. R. Richard. I looked up from the card, my gaze sweeping over the confused and embarrassed faces of our friends, and finally landed on Clara. The mask had slipped. Her smile was gone, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated triumph. She thought she had won. She thought she had just publicly, devastatingly checkmated me. In that moment, a strange clarity descended upon me. All the little inconsistencies, the passive-aggressive comments, the jokes that were never funny, the gaslighting that had made me question my own sanity. For years, it all clicked into place like a series of tumblers in a lock. This wasn't a joke gone wrong. This was a declaration of war. She had orchestrated this humiliation, this bizarre psychodrama with her ex-husband, to break me in front of everyone I knew. And the worst part, the part that truly sickened me, was that she thought I was too weak, too beaten down, to do anything about it. She expected me to crumble, to cry, to run from the room. I didn't. I held up the flimsy piece of black lace for everyone to see. Then I held up the card. I didn't have to say a word. I just looked at the lingerie, then at Clara, then back at the lingerie. The silence in the room was absolute. A thick, heavy blanket of awkwardness and dawning horror. Chloe's face was pale. Another friend of hers, Megan, looked like she was about to be physically sick. My own friends, my brother Ben, and my best friend Liam, were looking at Clara with expressions of cold fury. They understood immediately. They had seen her subtle cruelty cruelties for years, but this was a public execution. I carefully folded the lingerie and placed it back in the box, along with the note. I closed the lid. Then I looked directly at Clara, my voice calm and steady when I finally spoke. "Well," I said, my words cutting through the silence, "this is certainly a surprise. I think you and I need to have a conversation. In the meantime," I said, turning to the stunned crowd, "I'm so sorry to cut this short, but I think the party's over." No one argued. People started grabbing their coats and bags, muttering apologies, their eyes darting everywhere but at me or Clara. It was a mass exodus, a quiet, shameful retreat. Ben and Liam stayed behind, flanking me like sentinels. Clara hadn't moved. She was still standing by the fireplace, her face a mask of disbelief. Her plan had backfired spectacularly. The bomb had gone off, but she was the one standing in the crater. She had expected a meltdown, but she got a controlled demolition instead. After the last guest shuffled out, leaving a trail of awkward goodbyes, the three of us, Ben, Liam, and I, stood facing her. The silence was different now, brittle and charged with unspoken accusations. Clara finally broke it, her voice a high, theatrical whine. "What is your problem? Can't you take a joke?" "It was just a stupid, funny prank," Liam snorted, a harsh, contemptuous sound. "A prank? You call that a prank, Clara? You had your ex-husband send lingerie to your own husband's birthday party in front of all his friends. What part of that is funny?" She rounded on him. "This is a private matter. It has nothing to do with you." Ben stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "It has everything to do with us when you do it to our family. What did you think was going to happen?" "I thought he'd have a sense of humor," she shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "I thought for once he wouldn't be so sensitive and pathetic." And there it was, the script she'd been writing for years. I was the sensitive one, the broken one, the one who couldn't take a joke. It was the foundation of our entire dynamic. But looking at her now, seeing the raw panic in her eyes as her narrative crumbled, I felt nothing but a profound, chilling emptiness. The love I thought I had for her, the tangled mess of affection and obligation and shared history, had been cauterized. It was gone. In its place was a hard, cold resolve. "I want you to leave," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. "Pack a bag. I want you out of this house tonight." Her jaw dropped. "You can't be serious. You're kicking me out on your birthday over a silly joke?" I picked up the gift box from the coffee table. "This wasn't a joke, Clara. This was a message, and I received it, loud and clear. Now get out." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't pleading or arguing or trying to make her understand my feelings. I was giving an order. The power dynamic had shifted, and she felt it. A flicker of genuine fear crossed her face before it was replaced by rage. "Fine," she spat. "I'll go, but you'll regret this. You have no idea what you've just done." She stormed up the stairs, and a few minutes later, we heard a suitcase being dragged across the floor and the slam of the front door, and then silence. The party was well and truly over. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover that felt less like a headache and more like a state of being. The house was a wreck, littered with the ghosts of the party, empty bottles, half-eaten plates of food, deflating balloons. But the mess was nothing compared to the wreckage of my life. I felt hollowed out, scooped clean of emotion. Ben had stayed over, sleeping on the couch, and the first thing I saw when I came downstairs was him, sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee. He didn't say anything, just pushed one towards me. We sat in silence for a long time, the quiet punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator. "So," he finally said, "what's the plan?" I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like ash. "The plan," I repeated, the word sounding foreign. "First, I need a lawyer. A very, very good lawyer. A shark. The kind of lawyer that other lawyers are afraid of." Ben nodded slowly. "I know a guy. My old boss used him for his divorce. Said he was expensive but worth every penny. A real pit bull." I pulled out my phone and he gave me the number. I saved it under the name The Shark. It felt appropriate. My second call was to a therapist my doctor had recommended a year ago, back when I'd gone to him for anxiety and insomnia, symptoms I now understood had a single specific cause: Clara. I'd never made the call back then. Clara had convinced me it was an overreaction, that I was just stressed from work, that therapy was for people who were truly broken. I made the call now. I left a message, my voice cracking slightly as I explained that I needed an urgent appointment. Then came the hardest part. I started to document everything. I sat down with a legal pad and began to write, trying to force my brain to work chronologically. I started with last night, writing down every detail I could remember, the exact wording of the text, the description of the gift and the note, the names of everyone who was there. Then I went backwards. I wrote about the time she accidentally told her family about my father's struggle with alcoholism, framing it as a charming story about my own resilience. I wrote about the way she constantly undermined my career choices, calling my ambitions cute and my successes lucky. I wrote about the hundreds of small cuts, the casual dismissals of my feelings, the constant, low-level gaslighting that had eroded my self-esteem until I felt like a ghost in my own life. The more I wrote, the sicker I felt. It was like lancing a wound that had been festering for years. Patterns emerged from the chaos of memory. Her cruelty was never random. It was strategic. It always came when I was feeling good about myself, when I'd achieved something or was feeling particularly confident. Her goal wasn't just to hurt me, it was to keep me small, to keep me dependent on her for validation. And her relationship with her ex-husband, Richard, Richard. I'd always found it strange, the way she spoke of him. She claimed to despise him, but his name was always on her lips. They were still connected on social media, something she'd dismissed as keeping your enemies closer. I now saw it for what it was, an ongoing, unsevered connection. The gift wasn't a one-off stunt. It was the culmination of something that had been going on right under my nose. That afternoon, I met the lawyer. Mr. Davison was a short, impeccably dressed man in his late 50s, with cold, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through me. His office was minimalist and intimidating, all glass and steel and black leather. I sat across from his massive desk and told him everything, my voice low and shaky at first, then growing stronger as I laid out the facts. I showed him the picture I'd taken of the text message, the lingerie, and the note. He looked at it all without a flicker of expression. When I was finished, he steepled his fingers and stared at me for a long moment. "Well, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice a dry rasp, "you have been married to a textbook narcissist, a particularly brazen one, I might add. This is not just grounds for divorce. This is psychological warfare." Hearing him say it so clinically and without judgment was a strange kind of validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't oversensitive. I was a victim of sustained emotional abuse. "She's going to fight," I said. "She'll try to make this my fault. She'll tell everyone I'm unstable." Mr. Davison gave a thin, reptilian smile. "Let her. People like your wife are their own worst enemies. They're arrogant. They believe they're smarter than everyone else, and that makes them sloppy. Our job is to let her think she's winning, right up until the moment she loses everything." He explained the process: filing the petition, the discovery phase, depositions, and the eventual hearing. He warned me it would be long, expensive, and emotionally brutal. "She will try to destroy you," he said, his eyes boring into mine. "She will use your past, your fears, your insecurities, everything she knows about you as a weapon. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of Clara's triumphant face at the party, the look of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. "Yes," I said, my voice hard as stone. "I am." The first salvo from Clara's side came a week later. It was a formal response to my divorce petition, filed by a lawyer from a firm known for its aggressive, scorched earth tactics. The document was a masterpiece of fiction. In it, I was painted as a jealous, controlling, and mentally unstable husband. It cited my history of anxiety as proof of my erratic behavior. It claimed I had a drinking problem, twisting a few occasions where I'd had too much to drink at social events into a narrative of chronic alcoholism. It even alleged that I was financially irresponsible, despite the fact that I had been the primary breadwinner for our entire marriage. The most audacious claim was about the birthday party. According to her, the gift was an innocent gag that I, in a fit of paranoid rage, had misinterpreted, flying into a violent tantrum and throwing her out of the house. Reading it felt like being punched in the gut. Every word was a calculated lie, a distortion of the truth designed to assassinate my character. I called Mr. Davison in a panic. "How can she just lie like this? None of this is true." He was completely unruffled. "This is standard procedure for her type," he said calmly. "It's called the kitchen sink defense. You throw every accusation you can think of at the wall and hope something sticks. Don't worry about it. It's just noise. Now, let's talk about discovery." He explained that we could now formally request documents from her. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, emails. "She's given us an opening," he said. "She's accused you of being financially irresponsible. That means we get to look at every penny she's ever spent. Let's see how her story holds up under a microscope." While the lawyers exchanged paperwork, Clara launched a parallel offensive on the social front. She started calling our mutual friends, weeping, telling them her fabricated version of the story. She was the victim, the long-suffering wife of a volatile and abusive man. Some friends, the ones who were truly mine, saw through it immediately. But others, the ones who existed in the fuzzy, overlapping Venn diagram of our social circle, were swayed. I started getting texts and calls, some offering sympathy for Clara, others cautiously asking for my side of the story. It was exhausting and humiliating. I felt like I was on trial in the court of public opinion, and she was the star prosecutor. The pressure was immense. I stopped answering my phone. I barely left the house. The loneliness was crushing. The home we had built together now felt like a prison. Every object a reminder of her and the life I thought we had. One night, I found myself standing in front of the liquor cabinet, my hand hovering over a bottle of whiskey. The urge to just numb the pain, to drink until I couldn't feel anything, was overwhelming. It was the rock-bottom crisis Mr. Davison had warned me about. I saw Clara's smug face in my mind, heard her lawyer's voice in a deposition. "So, Mr. Miller, you admit you have a drinking problem?" I slammed the cabinet shut. I would not give her that ammunition. I would not become the person she was pretending I was. Instead, I called Liam. He was there in 20 minutes, and we spent the rest of the night talking, him just letting me vent all the poison and fear that had been building up inside me. He reminded me I wasn't alone. It was a lifeline. My therapy sessions became my sanctuary. Dr. Albright was a kind, perceptive woman who listened without judgment as I unburdened myself of 5 years of suppressed pain and confusion. She gave me tools to cope with the stress, grounding techniques to use when I felt a panic attack coming on. She helped me understand the dynamics of narcissistic abuse, giving a name to the fog of confusion I had lived in for so long. It was called gaslighting. It was called emotional manipulation. It was called coercive control. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't crazy. I was a survivor. Each session was like clearing away another layer of grime from a window, letting a little more light in. I started to see myself not as Clara's broken husband, but as a person who had endured something terrible and was fighting his way back. The discovery process was a slow, painstaking grind. We sent out subpoenas. We requested years of financial records. At first, Clara's lawyer stonewalled, filing motions to delay and limit the scope of our requests. But Mr. Davison was relentless. He filed counter motions. He threatened sanctions. He pushed and pushed until they had no choice but to comply. Boxes of documents started arriving at his office. It was a mountain of paper, a testament to a life built on credit and deception. My lawyer hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, meticulous woman named Sarah, to go through it all. For weeks, there was nothing. It seemed Clara had been clever, covering her tracks, and then Sarah found it. It was a needle in a haystack, a small, recurring monthly payment from one of Clara's secret credit card accounts to a holding company. It was labeled simply as consulting fees. It wasn't a huge amount, just a few $100s a month, but it had been going on for over 3 years. On its own, it meant nothing. But Sarah was good at her job. She dug into the holding company. It took some doing, tracking down incorporation papers, but she eventually found the name of the sole proprietor. It was Richard Sterling, Clara's ex-husband. My blood ran cold when Mr. Davison told me. She hadn't just been in contact with him, she had been paying him for 3 years. We still didn't know why, but we had a thread, and we started to pull on it. Mr. Davison's next move was to subpoena Richard's financial records as well, arguing that he was a relevant party to the marital dissolution due to this undisclosed financial relationship. Richard's lawyer fought it, of course, but the judge, intrigued by the consulting fees, allowed it, and that's when the whole rotten structure of their deception began to collapse. Richard, it turned out, was not the successful architect Clara had made him out to be. He was a financial disaster, drowning in debt from a series of failed business ventures. The money from Clara was just a trickle, not enough to live on. But as we dug deeper into her records, we found other things. Large cash withdrawals that coincided with trips she'd taken alone, supposedly for girls' weekends. We found emails. We had to get a court order for them, but we got them. The emails were the evidentiary turning point, the smoking gun that blew their whole conspiracy wide open. They were all there, a long, sordid correspondence stretching back years. They talked about me constantly. Richard would give her advice on how to manage me, how to subtly undermine my confidence, how to isolate me from my friends and family. They referred to it as a project. The goal, laid out in chilling detail in one particularly damning email from Clara, was to push me to a point of mental collapse, to make me seem so unstable that in a divorce, she would be seen as the victim, entitled to the house, the assets, and a hefty spousal support settlement. My money would be used to prop up Richard's failing businesses. It was a long con, and I was the mark. The birthday party, we learned, was supposed to be the endgame. It was Richard's idea, a piece of what he called psychological theater. They believed it would be the final straw, the thing that would push me over the edge into a public, undeniable breakdown. They had discussed it in emails for weeks, planning every detail, from the gift itself to the wording on the note. Clara's text message, the LOL, the feigned surprise, it was all scripted. They had grossly miscalculated my reaction. They expected tears and screaming. They got a lawyer and a forensic accountant instead. Reading those emails felt like watching a recording of my own vivisection. It was sickening, but it was also liberating. It was the truth. It was the proof I needed. It was my sword and my shield. Mr. Davison was ecstatic. "This is it," he said, a rare, predatory grin on his face. "This is not just a divorce case anymore. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. This is intentional infliction of emotional distress. We have them. They have no idea we have this. We save it for the hearing." We let her walk into that courtroom thinking she's still in control, and we dismantle her, piece by piece, with her own words. The strategy was brutal, but I agreed to it. She deserved no mercy. She had shown me none. The months leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. Clara's legal team, unaware of the bombshell we were sitting on, continued their campaign of harassment. They deposed me for 2 full days. Her lawyer, a smarmy man with a condescending smirk, grilled me about every aspect of my life. He brought up my anxiety, my father's alcoholism, every argument Clara and I had ever had. He twisted my words, baited me, tried to provoke an emotional reaction, but I was prepared. Dr. Albright had worked with me for hours, running mock cross-examinations, teaching me how to stay calm, how to answer only the question asked, how to breathe. I stuck to the facts. I did not get angry. I did not cry. I was a gray rock, and his attacks slid right off me. My composure seemed to infuriate him, which only strengthened my resolve. Clara, meanwhile, was living in a fancy apartment downtown, funded by the temporary support the court had ordered me to pay her. It galled me, but Mr. Davison assured me it was temporary, a small price to pay for the ultimate victory. She seemed confident, even arrogant. I would see her around town occasionally, always with her friends, laughing and drinking, playing the role of the carefree divorcee. She had no idea the guillotine was being sharpened. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. It wasn't a grand trial with a jury, but a formal hearing before a family court judge. The room was small and sterile, all polished wood and fluorescent lighting. I sat at one table with Mr. Davison. Clara sat at the other with her lawyer. She wouldn't look at me, but I could feel her radiating a smug confidence. She still thought she was in charge. She still thought she was going to win. The judge, judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, Judge Evans, known for her sharp mind and her intolerance for courtroom theatrics. The hearing began with her lawyer's opening statement, a 20-minute monologue painting me as a monster and Clara as a saint. It was the same litany of lies from the initial petition. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped in my lap, and focused on my breathing, just as Dr. Albright had taught me. Then, it was Mr. Davison's turn. He stood up, walked to the lectern, and gave a very different kind of opening statement. It was short, precise, and devastating. Your Honor, he began, his voice calm and even. For the past 6 months, my client has been subjected to a campaign of character assassination based on a complete fabrication. The petitioner, Mr. Miller, is not the aggressor in this situation. He is the victim. He is the victim of a calculated, long-term scheme of psychological abuse and financial fraud, orchestrated by his wife and her ex-husband, Richard Sterling. A scheme designed to systematically destroy his mental health for financial gain. And we have the proof. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I saw Clara's lawyer frown, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Clara herself shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Clara was the first to testify. Her lawyer led her through her prepared story. She was a compelling actress. She cried at all the right moments, her voice breaking as she described my supposed rages and instability. She painted the birthday party as a light-hearted joke that I, in my fragile state, had twisted into something sinister. I was just trying to make him laugh, she sobbed, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. I never thought he would react so violently. It was a convincing performance, and I could see even Judge Evans looking at me with a hint of skepticism. Then it was Mr. Davison's turn to cross-examine her. He started gently, asking her about her relationship with her ex-husband. We're friends, she said, a little too quickly. We're civil for the sake of, our history. Mr. Davison nodded. Just friends? You don't have any other kind of relationship? A business relationship, perhaps? Clara hesitated. No, she said. Of course not. Her lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance? Judge Evans looked at Mr. Davison. Where are you going with this, counselor? I'm establishing a pattern of dishonesty, Your Honor, he replied. Overruled, the judge said. The witness will answer the question. Mr. Davison then produced the bank statements showing her payments to Richard's holding company. He put them on the projector for the whole court to see. Mr. Miller's wife, he said, turning to the judge. Can you explain these payments, labeled consulting fees, to a company owned by the man you claim is just a friend? Clara's face went white. She stammered. It was a loan. I was helping him out. He was having a hard time. Mr. Davison raised an eyebrow. A loan? For 3 years? With no repayment schedule? And disguised as a consulting fee? That sounds less like a loan and more like an investment, wouldn't you say? He didn't wait for an answer. He moved on, his questions coming faster, sharper, each one backed by a piece of evidence. He brought up the cash withdrawals that coincided with her solo trips. He brought up phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between her and Richard. With each new document, another piece of her story crumbled. Her composure began to crack, her answers becoming clipped and defensive. Then came the finale. Mr. Davison approached the clerk with a thick binder. Your Honor, we would like to enter into evidence a series of emails between the petitioner and Richard Sterling. Clara's lawyer was on his feet again, shouting objections, but it was too late. Judge Evans allowed it. Mr. Davison placed a printed copy of the most damning email on the projector. It was the one where Clara outlined the entire plan, the one where she talked about their project to drive me to a mental collapse for financial gain. He asked her to read a specific sentence aloud. This project is taking longer than I thought, she had written. He's more resilient than we anticipated. We need something big, something public, to finally break him. Clara stared at the screen, her own words projected in giant letters for the entire courtroom to see. The silence was absolute. She looked like she had been turned to stone. Is that your email address, Mr. Miller's wife? Mr. Davison asked quietly. She didn't answer. Did you write those words? Still silence. Did you conspire with your ex-husband to intentionally inflict emotional distress on my client in the hopes of defrauding him in a divorce proceeding? Her lawyer was frantically whispering to her, but she didn't seem to hear him. All the arrogance, all the confidence had drained away, leaving behind a hollow, terrified shell. She started, her voice a faint whisper. I refused to answer, but she didn't need to. Her words were right there, on the screen, for everyone to see. She had convicted herself. The rest of the hearing was a formality. Her lawyer's blustering defense had evaporated. He could barely look the judge in the eye. When it was my turn to testify, Mr. Davison simply had me confirm the timeline of events and the effect her actions had on my mental and emotional health. Her lawyer had only a few half-hearted questions for me on cross-examination. There was nothing left for him to say. We had presented an airtight case, built on her own words and her own lies. Judge Evans delivered her ruling right there from the bench. She was furious. I had never seen a judge so openly angry. She looked directly at Clara, her eyes blazing. In my 15 years on this bench, she said, her voice shaking with controlled rage, I have seen a lot of contentious divorces. I have seen bitterness and anger and sadness. But I have rarely seen a case of such calculated, malicious, and predatory cruelty as this. What you did to this man is not just grounds for divorce. It is monstrous. She awarded me the house, all of it. She awarded me 75% of our marital assets, a figure far beyond the standard 50-50 split, citing Clara's egregious fault and her attempts to commit fraud. She vacated the temporary support order and barred her from from ever seeking spousal support from me. And then she did something I didn't expect. She announced she was referring the case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges of conspiracy and fraud against both Clara and Richard. Clara made a small, strangled sound. The color drained from her face. She had walked into that courtroom expecting to walk away with half my life. She was walking away with nothing but the clothes on her back and the possibility of a criminal record. Justice, when it finally came, was swift and brutal. As the bailiff called the next case, I stood up and walked out of the courtroom without a single backward glance. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt quiet. The war was over. I had won, but the scars were deep, and I knew they would take a long, long time to fade. The aftermath was messy, as aftermaths always are. The district attorney did end up pressing charges. Richard, facing his own legal and financial ruin, turned on Clara immediately, taking a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against her. The villain monologue I never got in person, I got in the form of his deposition, where he laid out their entire scheme with a kind of pathetic, self-serving detail. Clara ended up pleading guilty to a lesser charge and received 2 years of probation and a hefty fine. It felt anticlimactic, an insufficient punishment for the years of my life she had stolen, for the psychological damage she had inflicted. It was a bittersweet verdict, a perfect example of incomplete justice. The legal system had punished her for the fraud, for the crime it could quantify, but there was no sentence for the theft of a person's sanity, for the slow, deliberate erosion of their soul. I had to accept that. My therapy sessions shifted focus from survival to recovery. Dr. Albright helped me understand that true justice wouldn't come from a courtroom. It would come from me rebuilding my life, from finding peace not in her punishment, but in my own healing. I sold the house. It had too many ghosts. I bought a smaller place in a different part of town, a place that was just mine. I filled it with my books, my music, and the quiet comfort of solitude. I reconnected with the friends I had been isolated from, and I apologized to them for my distance, explaining what I had been through. They understood. True friends always do. The hardest but most necessary step was establishing permanent boundaries. I obtained a restraining order against Clara. It was a simple piece of paper, but it was a powerful symbol. It was a legal declaration that she was no longer allowed in my life, in my space, in my head. It was the final severance. I had to cut ties with some of the mutual friends who still tried to plead her case, who told me I should find it in my heart to forgive her. I learned that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not an obligation you owe your abuser, and I wasn't ready to give myself that gift just yet. Maybe I never would be. It's been 2 years now. The quiet in my life is no longer the tense, waiting silence of a battlefield, but the calm, steady silence of peace. I still have bad days. A certain song on the radio, a turn of phrase, a familiar scent sometimes. The past ambushes me, and the anxiety returns. A phantom limb aching where a wound used to be. But the bad days are fewer now. They are islands in a growing ocean of good days. I am reclaiming myself, piece by piece. I started dating again recently, cautiously, learning to trust my own judgment, to spot the red flags I had been trained to ignore for so long. I am not the same person I was before Clara. The man who walked into that 30th birthday party was naive, trusting, and desperate to please. The man who walked out of that courtroom was harder, warier, and more cynical. But he was also stronger. He was a survivor. Sometimes I think about that box, with its black lace and its cruel little note. It was meant to be the weapon that destroyed me. Instead, it was the key that set me free. She thought she was writing the final chapter of my story, a tragedy. She had no idea she was just writing the prologue to a much better one, a story of resilience, of recovery, of a life rebuilt from the ashes of a devastating betrayal. The legal system is a blunt instrument. It can give you a divorce. It can divide assets. It can even, sometimes, punish the guilty. But it can't heal you. It can't restore your faith in people. It can't give you back the years you lost to someone else's malice. That work, you have to do yourself. It's slow, and it's painful, and it's the hardest work you'll ever do. But it's worth it. Building a life on a foundation of truth, a life where you are safe and respected and valued, is the only real victory. It's the only justice that truly matters. And honestly, if you've managed to sit through this entire story, you've got the kind of endurance that could get you through just about anything. You deserve a medal, or at the very least, a subscription to something that brings you a little bit of peace. Take it from me. It's a better investment than a marriage built on lies.